the most I ever did was like I had a credit card that had like 0% APR for 18 months that I just kind of used to like, that was kind of my little like line of credit for the agency. It was maybe 20 grand. It was like pretty small. So it was nothing big. Okay. Yeah. Well, Colby, like I was saying, man, I really appreciate you doing this. Thank you for reaching out in the first place. Everybody on the show watching right now, this is Colby Allen. Um, very, very excited to have this guy on the show today because there's going to be some really deep knowledge that's going to be shared, and it's a very interesting niche that of what you do within the insurance industry. So, Colby, do you mind just kind of quick little background about yourself and then what your position is, what you do and your company and all that stuff. You
Yeah,
could.
sure. Sure. So people often call me Kobe, but my name is an L in it, so it's Colby. I'm definitely not an NBA basketball player, so I'll go ahead and throw that out there. I played basketball 1 year middle school and it didn't work out, man. I'm 5'6", so it wasn't a good idea.
Oh, you're only 5'6"?
Oh yeah, I'm not that tall.
Yeah, I'm about like 5'7", 5'8" on a good day, you know?
You still got me. So but yeah, so my name is Colby. I am a resident, born and raised, and probably will never leave South Louisiana. And been here my entire life. It's a great state, other than the hurricanes or crazy LSU fans. I'll go ahead and throw that out there too. Um, but yeah, so I have been in the insurance industry for going on 11, almost 12 years now, and had several different stints and different things to do. But for the most part, most of my background is finance and operations for agencies, particular regional and the national agency. I've done data project management. I've been on an M&A team as we would buy out agencies and bring over their books of business. Spent some time at a carrier in their marketing and agency relations department, doing research and helping agencies kind of learn our platforms and also redesign the platforms to be better for agents. Because like I'm sure you can attest that carrier platforms aren't always the best. So there's a lot of things that can be improved. But yeah, but going to today, I am a financial consultant with Agency Focus. And what we do is fractional CFO engagements or financial projects, per se, to help agency owners like you kind of get a handle on the financial operations that you have at your disposal that are very important. Because, as you very well know, being the owner, being the CEO, you kind of wear all the hats. And so, being the CFO is one of them. And ways that we help owners is to kind of help to take off that CFO hat for a bit, hire us to work on a couple of those things, and help you kind of align the financial operations of the agency to meet your goals. So you don't have to worry about it as much. We'll say that until you get to the point if you want to hire full-time controller, CFO, et cetera. But we also do valuations for agencies to help them figure out the value of their agency if they're ready to buy, sell, exit planning, growth planning, right? To kind of figure out what a current assessment is and figure out what you could do to get from point A to point B. And yeah, there's a lot, but that's kind of the two core things we do.
Got it. Got it. I think what we talked about originally was more so on like the buying, selling, acquisition side, maybe because that's kind of my main focus. But obviously,
Yeah.
the other side too is super, super important. One of the things, Kobe, that I tell people all the time, especially, I got this little like thumbs up bubble. I don't know if you see that. That was pretty cool.
See it.
Um, One of the things that I tell agents all the time is like, know your numbers. Like,
Hmm.
you should know your numbers. And honestly, after even talking to you, I was like, I don't know my numbers nearly as well as I really should. So that was a big eye opener for me. That's also why I'm stoked to talk to you because there's a bunch of questions I have, like just selfishly for my own agency that I think is going to help so many other people too. Just with that, like I said, most of the things that like my main gear here, and maybe we can do another call where we go more into the financial advising or like planning of
Sure.
the goal setting and the numbers of an agency. This was more kind of geared towards like how to purchase an insurance agency, how to sell an insurance agency, what you should be looking for, red flags, yellow flags, green flags, all those kinds of things, from what you've seen. So if you're cool with it, we'll kind of go that direction a little bit
Yeah.
more. But
Yeah, man.
um,
Let's do it.
also very interested, just real quick before we dive into that, with the financial like advising and planning of an agency aspect, what so would you say you just do all encompassing like goal setting and then planning to get to that goal, or how do you go about that process when you get a customer like me, for example?
Sure. It really depends on one, your level and where you are as an owner. There are some owners that are very good at knowing their financials, having good, clean financial statements, versus some owners that the only time they see a financial statement is when they ask for one from their CPA to do their taxes. And so the whole range, right? We work with all those owners. But to your question, yeah, we take on the role as a fractional CFO to really dive into, okay, let's organize your financials. Let's get your chart of
Mhm.
accounts clean. Let's set up your financial metrics in a way that we can track things that are meaningful. From there, I'm going to sit down with you as an owner and say, okay, what is meaningful to you? Because oftentimes when people think of a CFO or somebody that's going to come in and really it's all about cutting expenses. Actually, no. Like in many cases, I'm the opposite of that. My goal is to help you as an owner try to figure out what's the most efficient and best way for you to invest your resources to get the best return, to
Mhm.
grow your
Mhm.
team, to grow your agency, to do the things that you actually want to do. So I've got owners and CFO clients that their goal is to grow the agency from say 1 million to 5 million in revenue in 5 years. Okay.
Okay.
I've got some owners, they're at a certain level and they're like, I need to get as much profit of this agency that I can. So my goal is figure out what's important to you as an owner. How can we set a plan to make those things happen? And then make it to where you have peace of mind and confidence in making those decisions so you can sleep better at night.
For sure. So I guess to kind of like dive deeper and just into that, in a more real life example, like me, I'm
Mhm.
somebody who's, I'm 27. Um, I have a, a little over between $3 and $3.5 million book. Um, and my goal is to grow as large as possible. And I think there's the reason I want to kind of dive a little deeper into it is because I'm sure there's other people sitting in the exact same position right now, same seat, maybe around my age, or just trying to get to those numbers.
Yeah,
What are some of the places you've seen, like maybe just a couple that you've seen, like, I'm not holding you to these, but that you've seen are the best places to pour the money back in or to reinvest into growing that to those levels?
sure. A huge question that we often get is what are benchmarks for agencies as they're growing?
Sure.
And
It's a good
it's
question. Yeah.
it's it's not a double-edged sword, but I will say you're almost like right at the tipping point to where benchmarks will make very clear sense to you versus, okay, these things are insightful, they're helpful, but between starting scratch and up until a certain level,
Hmm.
the proportionality of growth is going to be relative to what you can sell, right? I'll just get straight to it. If
Okay.
you can sell, you're a good salesperson, or you have a good sales team that can actually bring the revenue in the door and build up the foundation. That's kind of the point you're at when you start from scratch to get to where you pretty much actually where you are now, right?
Right.
Once you get to around 300 to 350, here's where the proportions kind of kick in. So most agencies, a average salesperson, depending upon the market, the rates, there's a lot of different factors, but if you can produce, 3 to 5,000 in new revenue per month, okay? So that's
Okay.
one salesperson bringing in 35 to maybe 60,000 a year, 50,000 a year. Between your renewals, your retention, and that growth per year, you start to get proportional of, okay, well, now I'm growing at, say, 15% per year versus years 1 and 2, you're growing at 100%, 150%, right? You're just stacking up. And so
Right. Okay. That makes sense now.
that kind of makes
Okay.
sense. So
Yeah.
your growth is going to be based on the sales team or your sales system that you have in place to bring in the revenue to build that foundation, again, to build other things. And
Hmm.
so yeah, actually, that's oftentimes one of the biggest piece of advice I give to owners that are starting is actually set up your sales process first. You got the
Right.
service stuff that's going to come behind that, but around 4 to 500 in revenue is where we see a lot of owners kind of hit the not the pause button on selling, but you do have to kind of shift your focus a little bit from selling to now, okay, well, now I've got this machine that's moving. Okay.
For sure.
It needs some structure. We need some guardrails. We need some things to make sure that this is going to be consistent and predictable. And so as
Sales
you
process, you're saying that's.
So the sales process, yes, but also the rest of the infrastructure. So what's
Hmm.
your agency management system? Do you have a customer relationship or CRM, right? The
Right.
the systems that actually will allow you to manage the agency the way that you need to.
Got it. Okay, that's very interesting. I know that's another thing I kind of talk about in a lot of my videos is like processes, procedures.
Yep.
I always used to hear these things like early on when I was first starting, and I just was like, dude, I just need to sell, I just need to sell policies,
Yeah.
which I think for a lot of people just getting started, like, yes, definitely just focus on sales.
Yep.
But meanwhile, the processes and those it's very clear, especially now that you're reinforcing and you're validating that, like it is essential to scaling, right? So that's what you're saying. It's like that's the stuff that can take you to the next level if you have it all dialed in,
Exactly. Because at
essentially.
that point, yeah, once you get to a certain size, maybe it's like your aspirations. You said you want to have what, 10 agents by a certain point?
Yeah.
So do you think you can personally manage 10 sales agents on a daily basis?
No, I'm starting to feel like I'm already capping out.
So that's the thing is, right, having a system as an entrepreneur to recognize, okay, what does my organization look like? What's my
Uh-huh.
sales model? What's my service model? So yes, in the beginning, sell, 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 grow, 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 bring stuff in. But you do kind of get to a point as an owner, you're starting to see, well, okay, I know this is important. And so I may have to shift my focus a little bit to put some time and effort into this. It's a very common, actually, CFO client that we have usually
Uh-huh.
right around 700,000 in revenue. It's almost like a tipping point to where they got to this point and now they realize like, well, okay, what do I do with this? In order to get from 700 to a million per se, I know I need something more structured. My AMS system, I need to make sure it's organized, right? My data integrity, those types of things start to become way more important
Data
because,
integrity, huh? Okay.
yeah, at that point, you're
Huh.
starting to manage a lot more to data, which is to your question earlier, right? Know your
Correct.
numbers. And so there's a scale when your numbers, they're always important. I'll say that. But say if you got 50 policies in your AMS versus 500 policies or 1,000 policies, then that data becomes a lot more important because now you're using that data to manage what you have.
Got it. Okay, yeah, got it. And when you say 700 in revenue, you're saying like, okay, they grew by, when you say revenue,
Commission
um,
and fee income that the agency is bringing in, not premium.
700K.
Yep.
Got it. So that means they're doing roughly like 60K um a month or so.
Gross fees and commissions, pretty close to that. Yeah.
Gross fees and commissions. So that's like a $7 or $8 million book or something like that, maybe.
It depends on what your commission rates are, which is another thing too. I'll say for financial planning, financial operations,
Yeah.
there's a key difference talking premium versus talking
Hmm.
revenue.
Of course.
As actually we had this conversation whenever
Yeah.
we first talked, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
But it's a
you
good
can't.
point. Like, can you clarify that again? Like one more time. Honestly, I kind of forgot exactly what you said about that.
Sure. So oftentimes agencies premium as a book of business is
Uh-huh.
a lot easier to track oftentimes because your carriers track it.
Of course.
And so it's easy for you to pull a production report from them, kind of
Hmm.
aggregate your book of business from them and see, okay, I know I've got 5 million in gross premium. And so talking a book of business for agencies is usually easier because of that term I mentioned earlier, data integrity. For agencies to be able to know their trailing commission and fee revenue, you have to have a good system to keep track of those things as you're writing those policies and your agency management system to know, okay, this much premium translates to this much revenue. So if you're not necessarily using, also depends on your agency management system. So if you're having a system that only tracks your policies, not necessarily your commissions, and maybe you're doing your accounting in QuickBooks, which is very common,
Hmm.
those two systems, even though they're both important pieces of data, are disjointed. They may not be directly related or connected. And so
Uh-huh. Of
knowing your
course.
trailing revenue, right, is much very important in terms of your financial operations because that's what pays your payroll. That's what
Right.
pays your operating expenses. That's what pays you as an owner at the end of the day.
And honestly, Kobe, it kind of like bugs me just even thinking through my own systems. I'm just like, dude, my management system does not reflect
Mm,
very accurately what is actually going on financially. And then I look at my QuickBooks, which I have a bookkeeper that fully handles and like they do all of my stuff. And then those take forever to get. And then those I'm not 100% clear on always. Like there is a lot of like, for me personally right now, like I still see it's very messy between the two, like management system commissions from all these different carriers. What are my real numbers? So what would you say like is the best way to keep things like do you just need to focus on it every single month and like get those reports and like how what can you do to just kind of be proactive, like tips to make sure your stuff is really nice and clean and tidy?
yeah. Well, you mentioned working with a good bookkeeper. So that's probably the best thing you can do is work with someone who knows insurance agency accounting
Mhm.
and then you can set up the process and the kind of policies and procedures on how you code certain things from a management standpoint in your AMS
Mhm.
and also your bookkeeping platform to keep good financial records.
Got it.
Yeah. So there are some best practices, and there's a couple places out there that help with, what are the best practices for agency accounting.
Yeah.
Um, so here's another kind of difference too. Like we do CFO, like advisory strategy level for financial stuff. While yes, I know bookkeeping, I know those things. That's not necessarily something that I do
Right.
as like a transactional bookkeeper. But part of our process is we do look at, say, the agency owner's chart of accounts. Okay, what are the
Uh-huh.
accounts that show up on your statements? Are those the right categories? Are you putting expenses in the right places? We help you to
Yeah.
reorganize your statements to where you're putting things in the right places so that we can measure it to figure out, again, as a manager, what do you want to see and how do you want to see it?
I can't confidently say ours are like categorized super, super well right now. Honestly, we should definitely have like a more personalized meeting for us. But yeah, these are great tips. Um,
So here's
do
a
you
question for
have
you. Actually, let me
uh
ask you something.
yeah,
So
go
as
for it.
you got started as an owner, you said
Uh-huh.
you started, I think, in the captive space and then you went independent and you've been
Yep.
growing very well, right? What I've seen in the very recent past. And so what have you found or what are the things that you tried to find to do those types of things when starting your agency?
In a financial, you're saying like financial
So I think financial, but also just in general, like learning how to manage an agency. Like
yeah.
how have you learned those things so far?
Well, so as far as managing an agency, I mean, the first things first, like building up the first, year or 2 years are just really foundational years. You're really just trying to get those sales. Like I was saying, a lot of it is not focused on processes, procedures, even your numbers. It's not so, it's like you really just need to get down in the trenches and make sales. But also meanwhile, keeping those things in mind because if the plan is to scale and to grow with a team, you need to have processes. You're just shooting yourself in the foot if you don't have those things in place, because then it's just going to slow the potential new team members down, and it's actually going to slow down efficiency of your growth. So you even though it feels like it takes away from your day to day sales and activity, like allocating time to putting together a process, sales process, service process, retention. Obviously, the sales and retention are like the bloodline of this business, bringing stuff in and then keeping it.
Yeah.
That's building insurance agencies and books. Um, then as far as the management, yeah, once you get to a certain point, I think that's kind of where I'm at now after 5 years of building and slapping processes together as I kind of went. I wish I would have had more content available to me, or even just learned from more people where I could have, expedited some of these mistakes. But a lot of it was just slapping stuff on as I needed it, and it kind of went, came, and it's still happening like till this day.
Yeah.
Um, but it gets to a point where you do start to actually manage team, and that is then your focus shifts from just trying to make your own sales to getting the most out of your team members and um, building something that is sustainable without you.
Yeah.
um, so
So you're
that's
saying like
uh-huh.
you've tried to have a good balance of, yeah, like that hustle and sales necessity while also trying to
Yes.
focus on like trying to have the systems in place while you're also doing those things at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And meanwhile, juggling all the other things, like you said, like the hats that you're wearing, you're the financial, CFO, you're the CMO, you're doing the marketing, you're doing you're doing the HR, you're doing everything. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot to it, but, I think those are the most important. Like knowing your numbers too is just super important, especially early on. Because if you go in the wrong direction with that stuff,
Yeah.
I mean, you could probably speak on this but just based on examples of what you've seen, like, um, yeah, if you go in the wrong direction, even going into debt and stuff, like I personally never took on any debt. I never took a
Yeah.
loan out or anything. The most I ever did was like I had a credit card that had like 0% APR for 18 months that I just kind of used to like, that was kind of my little like line of credit for the agency. It was maybe 20 grand. It was like pretty small. So it was nothing big.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, other than that, I mean, um,
That's
what do
actually a
you
really
think
good.
is important as far as like the management stuff early on? Like, well, what have you seen um, that from successful agencies? Is there any like any common themes that you saw them do things well, like that they really were successful early on?
Yeah. So it's this is not going to shock you when I say it, but oftentimes the more successful agencies that we end up working with or seeing, it is a key owner who is
Hmm.
also the key producer that
Okay.
drives the revenue to the agency.
Yeah.
And then they also have the humility and the wisdom and the acumen to be able to recognize kind of like what you're talking about. When you get to a certain point and you realize, okay, this is too much for me, I need to find someone who does this better than me.
Yeah.
And then bring that person in, have the collaborative time to sit down and, get on the same page on how the ship should be going and what direction, how should people should be rowing. And then that person enables that owner to keep selling or do what they need to do that's more valuable. And then they continue to just kind of build as, with that same kind of mindset. I've got an owner right now who's
Uh-huh.
that exact archetype, right?
Yeah.
He is a phenomenal producer. Like he's built a $1 million agency in less than 5 years. Okay. And when I say
Oh
1 million,
wow.
I mean revenue. Okay.
Oh wow. Wow. So 10 mil
And
roughly, like, or roughly.
premium. Yeah, just depends on what your commission rates are. But
Got
yeah,
it.
like we're at the point where we're looking at, okay, well, now we need to hire a manager to do this because this is taking up a
Sure.
lot of my day and I'm not able to focus on these leads or these other things that I'm trying to do. Or I need to hire a new account manager to fill this part of my book. And so it's that mindset of usually a successful agency is oftentimes built around a key producer. But you also said something earlier that I want to call back is
Hmm.
having again the ability to hire great people to build a team that can sustain and continue that growth without you because you're
Right.
not the only person because it's also not uncommon for an agency to get to around probably close to that size 1 million in revenue and then
Hmm.
start to stall out because that's a pretty sizable book of business.
That
you
is. I
know
mean, that's my
that's a
goal.
that's a goal for so many people,
Yeah.
but it's not uncommon if you get to that point to then focus so much on servicing the book and trying to maintain those clients and those things that you kind of forget about growth mode. Because also at that level, you're making a good income. Your team is probably happy if y'all have good relationships. You've got
Yeah.
good systems to kind of keep those clients happy. Things are okay. Do you need to grow? Right? At that point, it can almost be a personal choice.
And do
So
you see them choose not to? Some like you're saying that sometimes they just don't.
it is very common. I won't throw a number on it, but it is very common for agencies to get to right about that size, 1 million in revenue, pretty close to that, and stay at that level for a number of years. Yes.
Hell no, Kobe. We're not doing that, man. I'm
Exactly.
going. I'm gonna
Do it,
keep
bro.
going.
Keep going.
Yeah, especially that's the other thing. That's why I like prefaced when I was kind of asking you, like personally, like as a younger guy, I'm 27. I definitely got another 10 years of like grind mode in the tank,
Mm,
without a doubt. Like I'll be, 37. So it's no big deal. But
close.
yeah. I mean, dude, honestly, I think it's gonna keep going. What else are you gonna do? Like I don't
Yeah.
know. So
I mean, to that
um
point, too, another owner that I've met and worked with built up a really good book of business. Him and his partner were at a great place. They sold. And
uh
then he's young. He's in his 40s. He sold. He got a nice
okay.
payday from selling his agency. But after 6 months, he's like, I'm bored. Like, what do I do?
Yeah,
And so, yeah, I think
well,
people who are driven are naturally driven.
for
And
sure.
so, while yes, there are milestones and goals, oftentimes once you get there, and you'll probably feel this, right? Or you'll share the same sentiment. Like, okay, what's next?
For sure. Yeah, and I guess that's a good like segue into what I really wanted to like dive deep into, which was how do you actually sell an insurance agency and like what are key indicators of sales? Like maybe you do get to that $10 million mark in premium or $1 million revenue. I know that you like to talk the revenue. My mind is just stuck on premium, but you do get to that $1 million premium, revenue mark, and you want to just exit and go into real estate or go into whatever you feel like, go live on a farm and wherever and just enjoy life. What is the process that you've seen some of these successful agencies go through in just a nutshell of selling their agency, and how does that kind of play out like in a nutshell from what you've seen?